This is the Chapter 3 Stigma podcast. This podcast was created to be there for any individual who feels like they are at a low point in life and are confused, seemingly alone, and helpless in their situation. I am a recovering alcoholic, and I felt this way too, until I sat across the table from another addict who shared his story and made me realize that I was not alone in my struggles. My life was saved by this realization, and I hope to help anyone struggling by sharing my story to show you that you are not alone and that life can contain unbelievable riches and meaning. Welcome. I am glad you are here. All right, hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Chapter 3 Stigma podcast. This one has me in a very surreal and different place right now, physically and emotionally. And after a workout with one of the guests this morning, I would say spiritually too. But anyway, I am sitting here in Phoenix, Arizona with two friends, one of which I met just this morning, and another one that we'll do intros here very quickly, but that I've known probably for the last year and a half and really got to know quite deeply in the last few months as we connected over a similar but different healing journey that we've both been on. And though our experiences in our history differs, it was just incredible for me to see and experience what connecting with somebody else that is going through the healing process from, experiences in their lives that were traumatic or incredibly impactful and, in a big way, never really got integrated into their life or addressed in any manner. And I've really gotten into thinking about, trauma and those like highly impactful life experiences in my recovery journey from alcoholism. A big reason being, as I've talked about on the podcast before, like the three forces that exist that can really send someone across a threshold and turn them into an alcoholic or addict are the genetics, the environment that they surround themselves with, and then finally trauma. And so trauma was the concept and idea of trauma was always there from the very first time I stepped into rehab. It's just been on my mind. It's been something I want to explore and just further understand and actually connect with how each and every one of us experience it in some manner and integrate it into our lives differently. So after that long and rambling introduction, I'm going to have Eric first introduce himself, and then Eric's going to introduce his friend Ben.
Hi, I'm Eric McCormick, or you might know me as Outlaw Strength. So me and Kyle met at Tough Fest this last year. Actually, we met at a hunting expo the year before that in Salt Lake. I'm pretty much a fitness coach, and I work with some of the most amazing talent in this world. I've trained with Cameron Haynes for over 12 years. David Goggins, Colby Covington, Mark Bell, Kip Folks. I mean, just a list of amazing talent. So it sort of has put me in front of a lot of different people. My previous life, I was a law enforcement officer. I was a police officer for 13 years. I got into training and exercise. I trained at the police academy in physical fitness and defensive tactics. I've seen a lot of things in my life, and pretty much had transitioned out of law enforcement to go back to my roots after I had a traumatic situation with my fiancé. She had an accident and passed away when I was on duty. And that was pretty much my cracking point and my point that things changed in my whole entire life. Became training, coaching, and realistically, sort of on this healing journey that me and Kyle have been discussing was since I got out to Phoenix, Arizona. I moved out here 3 years ago, and I really tried to find a new route of healing and spiritual, physical, all those things. I'm trying to find that balance, but I actually came into somebody that introduced me to MDMA. And I hired this professional assistant, this guy that sort of coached me of how to use this medicine as some therapy healing. And it was an amazing experience for me and journey. And through this thing, I have, moving out here, I've became neighbors with Ben, which I'll introduce him here in a few minutes. And we've just connected and became brothers. A lot of that is through exercise that we have trained a long time together, and training and exercising with other people. It's pain, it's discomfort, but that brings a mold on bond that you're going to battle together. And that's how I sort of dealt with childhood traumas, through exercise, releasing energy, being that. And that's where it's always got me through my whole entire life, has been physical fitness or exercise. But becoming 50 years old, sometimes you have to branch out and find other ways of healing and changing, not just physical. So my friend Ben had lost his wife in a traumatic accident, and it really bonded us closer together because I knew that exact feeling of having somebody stripped from you and not having that moment to say goodbye, of how to cope, how to deal. And it was such a blessing to be in that moment to help Ben through that. And he did some experience with the same coach that I hired, and hopefully maybe he could share a little bit about his journey and some of the recent things that have came up after his heart has been opened. I'd like to just introduce him for a second. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that, and we'll just dive into that.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Kyle. It's a pleasure to be here. I feel like a boy amongst giants with these two guys. I'm just a regular guy, I'd say.
Same here.
I think that's pretty relatable, but I'm honored to be sitting here. Yeah, and Eric and I have definitely been brought together by no action of our own. Definitely a higher power, shared experiences, shared passions, shared faith. Have you ever had your life change in a moment? Maybe that moment is a matter of hours, like mine was, actually multiple times, if we want to get into that. Most recently with my wife, Tara. Absolute love of my life since 20 years old. And now at 45. But maybe your moment took a year, but your life changed. What does that look like? How do you deal with that? How do you cope? How do you meet your responsibilities? How do you use that as a positive? Not only for yourself, but those around you, potentially. Those are the questions that I sit here and ponder. Hope that we can give you a taste of our experience, and maybe that'll meet you somewhere in your life. I don't know if I fully introduced myself, but my name is Ben Koehler, and I'm just a guy trying to live this world with the best version of myself, and that can be challenging a lot of times. I've certainly come up against trauma a handful of times in my life, and I think we all probably have. I think really my purpose from a higher power is to live through that trauma and share it, connect with other people, especially connect with other men. I mean, that is a challenge in this day and age, right? We don't rely on other men like we should. And I look to our ancient ancestors. I'm so enamored by Native Americans and the healthy masculine spirit that they really fostered and passed on to their sons. I think women do this really well today. I think we've lost it a bit as men. And what that ends up happening is we feel really secluded and isolated. And then we start facing our battles alone. And any war strategist out there will tell you on the battlefield, you can't do it alone. If we want to bring this back to a war analogy, or a warrior spirit, certainly there's a certain amount of independence we need to have and belief in ourselves, but we ultimately can't do it alone. So I'd be happy to talk through that, and hopefully some insight will be gained here today. Yeah, absolutely. You've hit on something that I've thought often about, since I've, really transitioned and changed my life and gone from trying to fight my battles alone to understanding that, I need others. I need my recovery journey was based in a lot of spiritual reconnection and finding a relationship with God again, but then that ultimately led to connection with other human beings. And that made me realize that there was a loss in our lineage about how to deal with suffering, how to grieve appropriately, and how to heal. I think you're spot on about that. And I kind of want to ground some timelines here, and then kind of get into more depth on each of your stories. But Eric, when was it that your fiance passed away? You said that was kind of the turning point for you and ultimately what led you to
Oh, yeah.
Phoenix.
So that was in 2011.
2011. Okay.
Yeah. So that was, it was over a decade ago.
Yeah. And was there, I guess it was a sudden, unexpected event.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. She was in a drowning experience while I was working, and I didn't know that she was even going to the river that day.
Mhm.
And she was with her best friend, and it was a hot day, and they just thought they'd go float the river. And she tried to swim across Elkton River, which is sort of it's a river, and it has some rapids. And Genevieve was her name, and she was into physical fitness like myself. She was also a coach, but I was a cop, and she was a coach, very physically fit. And she tried to swim across this river with her best friend, and she made it to the other side, but she had used all of her energy and pretty much got pulled under and drowned. And her best friend witnessed that whole experience. So there was a lot of trauma that was me and also other people that were still living.
Mm-hmm.
So you had
when and how did you find out or hear
so
about
I was working, and my police chief came to me and told me that Genevieve, there was an accident and she drowned. And at first I was just like, no, she's at home. She didn't go to the river. And then her best friend called me, and I felt that experience. And then they had another police officer drive me to where she was. And I got to see her when she was, passed away,
Mm-hmm.
Before they took her to the hospital. So that experience that was the hardest moment of seeing your loved one, lifeless, on a table, that was like the moment saying goodbye.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I've had my mom and dad pass away, but this was just different.
Yeah.
When it's your soulmate and the one that you, through law enforcement, you're dealing with traumatic situations every single day.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked in a smaller agency, but I had to support other agencies. So I was always in traumatic situations. And I've had 8 people die in my arms, over those 13 years, because I could get there before paramedics. I could get there and just try to do whatever I can. And she was the one that pretty much allowed me to keep doing that job.
Mm-hmm.
So when that sort of hit home, I I cracked. That was my moment that I cracked, and it settled a little bit. But yeah, that was the moment that everything changed. Then I remember the feeling of that loss.
Did you pursue any sort of like deliberate healing process in the weeks or the months after that? Or, what how do you how did you react and try to, like in losing Lucy, it was just like we really had to distill it down to day by day. Like just wake up and then do the day that was in front of you. But, where were you at and how did you progress through that time period?
Well, so back when I was in law enforcement, back in those days, it really was sort of looked down upon
Right.
for therapy.
Right.
And because that sort of goes on your permanent record of those
Mm.
things. So I really didn't have any support group really.
Mhm.
I left I couldn't go back to my house.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I left everything and I stayed in a friend's trailer
Mhm.
and I just couldn't go back to where I lived before. So I just stepped away from that whole entire life. And that was sort of where I could see how a lot of military, they commit suicide is
Mhm.
that the processing time, the downtime.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to work. So I was just sitting there in the feelings, in the
Mhm.
moments. And I wasn't, at that time, I didn't know God.
Okay.
I didn't have a relationship with him. And so I was alone.
Mhm.
And that's the moment that I thought about, committing suicide
Yeah.
in that trailer. But the only thing that stopped me is I have 2 children.
Mhm.
And that was some of the things that I didn't want to leave that. So there wasn't really any help.
Yeah.
And I went to a doctor and pretty much they just gave me some Zoloft when
Yeah.
I felt like the emotion was overwhelming. Here, take this.
Yeah.
I think I took 6 to 8 weeks off from law enforcement, and then they introduced me back in slowly. I worked some drugs for a while. I
Mhm.
did work with DEA. I'm very fortunate. I was able to do not just back to patrol.
Yeah.
So they integrated me back to work some drugs and doing some things I had some skills of doing, and going back, diving into that world it's super negative.
Mhm.
It's a world of people will use their children and use
Yeah.
things, whatever they can. It's the darkest world.
Mhm.
And that's where I sort of made a choice. I was like, I have 2 choices. I can continue this and I know I will be miserable for the next 13 years, or I could try to step away and do something else. And that's
Mhm.
why I went back to my roots to exercise, training, and coaching in a different way.
Yeah. Wow.
That was intense.
Yeah. That really is.
That's where that first crack. And so
Yeah.
when I moved out to Phoenix, that's where my wife, I got remarried, and I have a girl with her, Charlie. She's 5 years old, and when I got here, I was able to find professional help.
What what led you to seeking that out in the first place? Or was there a moment where you realized you're like, what's working, or I'm sorry, what I'm doing right now is not working?
Yeah, I mean, that's where you just sort of have to. I think that when you get older, you sort of start looking at things differently.
Sure. Yeah.
And uh, I was sort of done just being okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's where moving to a big city as Phoenix from Eugene, Oregon,
Yeah.
population 200,000,
Yeah.
6 million, there's a lot more resources out here.
Mhm.
So they had some TV show, some new program for the Phoenix police agency out here getting help.
Mm.
And it's through an app. So there is no record of it. You just
Yeah.
call a doctor and you get to talk with them. So I saw that they're Phoenix, and out here it's a war zone. I mean, Phoenix is a big city and there's
Mhm.
shootings, killings
Mhm.
every single day here. Um, so seeing that they're actually getting help. So I called up this number, this program, to see if it exists for other law enforcement.
Mhm.
And they just referred me to Mental Health for America. And that was the first time I just went into saying, I'm at the point I'm willing to get help
Mm.
and to really believe in some professionals.
Yeah.
And that's where I went to Mental Health of America. And went for my first 12 weeks of there. And then that's where I got turned on to some other help, some different kind of coaching and healing. So that's where I got into MDMA.
Okay. And then just one more thing kind of through that time period, you had mentioned when you lost your fiance that you did not have a relationship with God. When and how did that come into the picture for you? Because you are a man of faith. It's very apparent. I mean, we were doing our workout today, and you were saying blessings and prayers for us, probably because of how I was struggling. And but no, it was really impactful to me and profound, because like I'm still working on what my faith means to me and how I portray it and bring it out into the world. And it's just very clear with you.
I'll give you just a quick story of how this sort of turned. And I was baptized at 40 years old, so it's never too late.
Wow. Yeah.
And how this sort of occurred was I was sort of on this healing phase, and I met Emmy, and I was doing my personal training, and I was helping Tony, one of my friends, and he had a church, and I was helping him through training. He was like, "Hey, have you ever thought of church?" And actually, the church was right down the street from Emmy's apartment, which was walking distance. And he invited me one day, and this was the craziest feeling. Was I was making the commitment to go to church that day with Emmy. And my mom and dad have both passed away. And I had the craziest feeling of my dad. I felt my dad. I felt him there being present. I told Emmy, I was like, there is something this Sunday, my dad is here in my heart. I don't know what that means. So we went down to church, and they always have a greeter at the back door introducing. And the very first person I met, his name was Larry, and that was my dad's name. And he was a cowboy, in which my dad was a cowboy, and looked like my dad, mustache, cowboy hat. And he introduced me and welcomed me into the church. And he actually sat behind me during service.
Wow.
So I'm a kind of person that I don't believe in just coincidences. I think there's a path, and you just have to be open to that path.
Yep.
And that was sort of like that moment. My dad was present. I felt him. And I've only felt that Holy Spirit a few times in my life. But when you feel it, there's a deeper connection. I wish I had it more often. But once you feel that, that will sort of get you to that path of actually that true healing.
Yeah.
And that nobody else can do. And that's where it really comes down to it. There is somebody that's always there with you, that loves you, that cares about you, that really wants you to be your best version, to help others. And you just have to let him in. But we're all on that journey. And that's sort of that moment. But it took me a while to put those repetitions in, to go. And I was very fortunate that the pastor was a friend of mine. And he baptized me.
Wow.
So you need a friend. You need people that are skilled in certain areas. And that's why I believe in life, we're trying to add to our team.
Yeah.
And that's the main focus. If you find somebody that has a gift and allow them to teach you their gift, that is going to get you so much farther in this journey of being balanced in life, spiritual, mental, physical, social. And that's where I'm trying, is find how to be balanced, a balanced man.
Yeah.
The B+. I don't need to be an A.
Yeah.
I would like to be a B+.
I love that perspective. Well, you're the story about feeling the presence of your dad is like, it's giving me goosebumps and like kind of making my heart race a little bit. So there's a part of my daughter's story that I've never shared through this podcast or through any of the newsletters. It's just been kind of something that we've kept within our family. But so my daughter, when she was born, like we knew her health complications, And so she was born in an OR. She was stabilized there and then immediately brought to the NICU. And so she spent all 8 of her days in the NICU. And the NICU nurses and staff are just some of the most incredible human beings in the world. Like, this caring type A personality. It was just incredible to be around and see, and just the love that was showered on Lucy in her time. But we would show up in the mornings, and we were staying at the Ronald McDonald House in the hospital, same floor. So it was like a 2-minute walk from our bed to Lucy's bed. And we would usually go there at the same time, Alyssa and I, and we'd say hi to Lucy, meet the nurse if we hadn't met her before. And we walked in the day before she passed away, and the new nurse was there, and we're kind of saying hi to Lucy, and then I turn to introduce myself to the nurse, and she's like, "Well, I'll be here the next 2 days. My name's Rose." Rose is the name of my paternal grandmother, who died quite young, and I never got to meet. And in her lifetime, she had 5 children with my grandfather, and she never got to fill the role of being a grandmother. All of her kids are still living, all of her grandchildren are still living, all of her great-grandchildren. And as soon as she introduced herself to me, I was like, Lucy's going to be leaving us soon. But, my grandma is here, showing us that it's going to be okay. And of all the nurses that Lucy had, Rose just treated Lucy like just this cute little girl. Like, she tied a pink bow and put it on her head and was just so kind and caring. And that was one of those experiences. Like, I had my faith prior to that, but that just it's just like growing the foundation deeper when things like that happen, and you see that. And I'm a rational person, and I could look at a situation like that and go, well, X percentage of people have the name Rose, and what the vast majority of the nurses in the NICU are women, and so the likelihood, there's a real likelihood that someone could be named Rose. But then it's like, yeah, or it could be something different. And exactly. And so it was this beautiful experience. It was hard because I genuinely realized that I felt we were going to lose Lucy when Rose was there. But yeah, it's just like, again, those experiences, it's like you can let them slide, or you can sit in them and just like bask in the power and in the incredibleness of it. And so, yeah, it's amazing. And I mean, my faith, our faith, my wife and my faith has truly carried us through this time. And so then it sounds like you entered into your treatment, and when you moved down here to Phoenix, did you move right in next to a couple blocks down from where we sit right now, or how did you and Ben get to know each other?
So this is sort of crazy how this all worked out. I lived in Eugene, Oregon for 30 years and lived in the valley. Me and Cameron Haynes were neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
And that place is in a valley, very covered with fog, rain,
Mm-hmm.
but I was just a grinder. That's how I just lived.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife, she wasn't very happy with the situation. So we were looking at possibly moving. I was looking at maybe moving to Salt Lake City. Is for a company called Mountain Ops I work with. They wanted me to come out there and be more a part of their team. But then also my wife's best friend from college, the house right next to him opened up. And they messaged us and were just saying, hey, there was a house available. We could be neighbors. And that's another situation that my wife was sort of recalling to her to be happy again.
Yeah.
So I had no idea. I'd never even seen our house, but I really wanted my wife to be happy. So I was willing to relocate and do this. So we pulled the trigger. I moved out here, never even seen the house. We moved in and then we bought the house, and then this neighborhood is the most amazing neighborhood. For Easter, I remember going to 5 different houses.
Wow.
And meeting the neighborhood and connecting. And it was unheard of because I was in COVID, Eugene, Oregon, and people were scared to be within 5 feet of you.
Yep.
So, and that's how I first met Ben, which is we've just connected through the neighborhood. And then we just sort of connected through more of the exercise and Brotherhood and Christ. And we've just became really great friends. So, yeah.
And I think one of the messages there that I pick up on that I haven't always been good at picking up on is the people that do come into your life. I think is one of the ways that God works and this world works too. Even if you don't maybe have a belief in God, I do think it's the way this world works. It's the people that come and go through your life, through your experiences. That's an area that I've tried to encourage myself to slow down in the moment and be present in the moment for the people that come into your life. And it may just be, we've all got stories. It may be a quick passing on the street, or it may be a longer conversation. But I know for me, that's one of my truths. And where I often find the best version of myself is like looking to the people around me and the opportunities to serve in a way the people that come through my life. And when I say serve, it could just be, maybe it's just a hello. Maybe that person just needed someone to look them in the eye in that moment and see them.
Yep.
So, Kyle, I can go on a little bit more about my...
Yes, that's what I wanted to get into next. So, as far back as you want to go, but kind of what has brought you to where you're sitting at today.
So let me start with earlier this year in April, and how my life was transformed in 12 hours in my particular experience earlier this year. My wife, Tara, passed away on April 3rd, 2024. We were out to dinner, her birthday, April 4th. And so one day shy of her birthday, we were out to dinner on a Tuesday night with some friends here in Phoenix. Very typical Tuesday night, a work night for us. We're a family of 4, 2 teenage daughters in high school. And from all, aspects of very average middle-class family, all the things that a lot of people deal with, jobs, both of us, kids, mortgage, all the responsibilities, right? And passions, fun, blessed. All of that changed very quickly. We left dinner, crossed the street we've crossed many a times not at an intersection, but not in any kind of risky situation. Left the restaurant and left the restaurant with all our wits about us, not a night of heavy drinking. And I just set the scene to say, I think a lot of us, can relate to that type of experience.
Mhm.
And certainly not picking up on any warning signs. And 4 of us crossed the street and 3 of us made it to the other side. And suddenly my wife, who had been standing next to a friend of mine, two people over from me, wasn't there. And you turn around and for whatever reason, there's certainly more questions than answers. And I think a lot of people can relate in these tragic accidents. Don't know why. Maybe she thought she forgot something in the restaurant. Maybe she dropped something, picked it up, but she was not in step with us, continued to cross the street. And in a split second, a car came that none of us saw. She took a misstep and was hit by this vehicle in a very dramatic way. Right in front of me. I can recount every moment of that scene and the helplessness of, being 20 yards away, but at the same time being 100 miles away because of nothing that could do in that moment. And, then the night suddenly goes real quickly. I find her on the ground on the street. I did find her with some vital signs, and that gave me some hope. But we were quickly knew the severity of the situation. She was not conscious, but did have vitals. I have a small experience in EMS in my past, and knew. We all, those that were there knew it was a dire situation. She was rushed to the hospital. And that night, just so hard, so helpless. Having to call my kids who expected us home in 10 minutes. We had just been texting with them, and suddenly, we're not home. Have to make that call that mom's been hurt. Turn to friends immediately. Turn, to Eric and other friends and gather the community. I think it's important for us to be willing to turn to our friends and ask for help. It can be real difficult. That's an area that I have tried to lean into. And then the other key moment for me really that night was feeling really helpless, kind of trying to figure out what happened, questions just circling the why, sadness, anger, all of it. But at one point, getting on my knees or sitting with my hands crossed, my elbows on my knees, and just praying, God, I need you in this moment. I trust you. And whatever happens, though I may not understand it, I know your hand is over, and it will be okay eventually. A tough prayer to make. And my thought process there's not a good outcome. We know the severity of her injuries were extreme. We also know there's a real possibility she doesn't make it through the night, as the surgeons are rushed in. And
were your kids able to get to the hospital?
My kids were brought to the hospital at this point. And that prayer just being, Lord, if this is her time to take her home, I'll honor that. Or if this is her time to fight further, I'll honor that too. But thy will be done.
Mm-hmm.
For me, that's powerful.
Mm-hmm.
It keys into one of my key pillars in my life, faith, and a belief in something greater than myself. And I claim Jesus Christ as my savior. But that's for me. And I just challenge everyone to look. I think we're all spiritual beings.
Mm-hmm.
This is an area I would challenge all of us. What does spirituality mean to you? And find that. For me, again, I'm going to speak to myself, if you relate or not. But I think there's something to be said for a greater power than self. And it has showed up. Unlike Eric, I was born into a family of believers in God, believers in Jesus Christ, and given that opportunity to learn and find my own way, but nothing perfect. I born into a very broken home, alcoholism, broken marriage, adultery, abuse, and spent the first 20 years of my life just in a blur, isolated, alone. But faith was always there. And also this concept of who's introduced into your life was always there. That saved me. That saved me from drugs, alcohol, suicide in those first 20 years, along with, to Eric's point, like physical activity was one of my key motivators. And so, the faith, physical activity have always been pillars in my life that I can rely on and come back to. And so back to that night at the hospital, as we're going, at this point, have gone from April 2nd to April 3rd, middle of the night, and that prayer, and then what's my purpose? I have this little, and I wrote it down here because I'm a very visual person. BFP, belief, faith, purpose. And that night, I think there are these moments in my life where I've been challenged in each of those areas. And I'll question them. But then I'll question myself, and faith. And how do I experience that? It's prayer. And it's not always with words. Sometimes it's just sitting and trying to listen. I sat and listened that night. My purpose is my 2 young daughters, has been since they were born, before they were born, that I even knew about, but renewed again. I need to show up for them in an authentic, real way as a man of this world. Doesn't mean I'm perfect, by no means. Yeah, that B+ work real well. Good batting average, right? So, Kyle, I keyed in to that message, to that, and I did, maybe not recognize it as positivity in that moment, but it was motivation to get through that night, show up for my kids. Because I'm not living for this world. If it was just about me, I don't know what that night looks like. Might look a lot different. Showing up for my kids in that moment, the key motivation. So just like keying into those, in those traumatic moments, what's your belief? What's your faith? What's your purpose? Can you find some motivation just to take that next step in those moments? And we lost Tara about 9 hours after the accident, multiple surgeries, surgeons coming and going, emotional swings from a positive to a negative. And ultimately, we lost her. But I had made that prayer, and I really trust in that prayer. And it's helped me get up every day since. And it's helped me try to show up every day since. Not perfect by no means. And some days not getting up as early as maybe other days. And lots of days not feeling like getting up. But the prayer and the motivation that comes through that have really supported me these last 6 months. And I can see that as a pattern in my life in the past. We could talk about, I for whatever reason, I've had a number of heavily traumatic experiences. And I don't say that as like a badge of honor by no means, or I'm any different from anyone else, or my problems are any greater. No, it's just who I am. It's my story. And I'm sure there's others can relate to it. And it's not even the heaviest story. Like there are lots more suffering out there than I've experienced. But it's humbling. It's also where I find my purpose. To use those experiences, I think God, in my belief, really, it's not about this world being taking care of you or making it easy on you or making me happy. No, I'm going to go through trials and tribulations in my life. Jesus went through plenty. We can see that in other key figures in history. Trials and trauma are, I believe, a way of life for many of us. It's how we might use them to impact the relationships around us. And that's, I think that's at my core. And even where some of my talent is, some of my strength. I'm honored to still be here and be able to talk through some of this trauma. The trauma doesn't define me. It's just part of my story. And maybe that touches someone out there.
I've personally been really challenging my own thinking around this with regards to what is, that ultimate question, what is the point of life? Why am I here? And, especially in our society today, I feel like it's, we're pursuing happiness. We're obsessed with happiness. We're obsessed with comfort. And one of the things that my experience really challenged me on, and I had this revelation actually watching my son struggle up a portion of like the jungle gym. Like it was a really uneventful moment, but I was standing back from him and watching him struggle and come up to this barrier that he had continually been blocked on at the park. And all of a sudden he figured it out and he got past it and he worked through it. And what I felt inside, I suddenly realized, I was like, well, what if God feels the same way watching us work through suffering and moments of struggle? And what if the point of life is not this pursuit of happiness and comfort, but instead this concept of bear your suffering as well as you can and build that community and be there and serve others. And it's just really, it's changed a lot for me. It's changed my thought patterns, the way I just view the world, the way I handle difficult situations that still arise day to day. Even though we've gone through quite a lot of suffering, it's like there's no free pass. Once you get through a scenario that life presents you, God doesn't hand you like a debt paid note. It's like, no, you never know how life is going to shape up. And I'm just like amazed with the story that you just shared, when really, like, this probably isn't the best way to say it, but like in the heat of the moment, like when it counted, the fact that like you did go to that prayer, because that took me a long, long time to find myself in a situation where the way that I started to pray was like I would state what I was selfishly desiring. It's like, I want this situation to be this way.
Right.
But then I always ended the prayer with, grant me the strength to do whatever is part of your plan.
Right.
How did you get there?
Experiences. Not anything, no superpowers by no means. Trials in the past
Mm-hmm.
had prepared me for that moment.
In
Probably because, I then
Right.
needed to show up for my kids.
Mm-hmm.
Truly, it's reps, right? Put those reps in. So, yeah, I wish there was a formula
Did you
to
have
be there,
any
but
Did you have any experiences where it's like you found yourself asking why more, and then days, weeks, months later reflected back, or had an experience where you reflected back and it's like, oh, this was part of the plan?
mm-hmm. So not with Tara's loss.
Mm-hmm.
And that might sound crazy
Mm-hmm.
to some out there. Much of my early life through my 20s, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Dealing with alcoholism in my family,
Mm-hmm.
and the brokenness of that and the impact on our family. Yes. Lots of why conversations, and then losing people close, having in the EMS world, in the professional life, having people die in my hands that for all intents and purposes should not die. Yes. Certainly lots of whys. However, with Tara's loss, there was this peace with that prayer, Kyle.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah.
And I can't totally explain it, but I know it. It's peace, and it was immediate strength.
Yeah.
As well.
Yep.
It does not diminish the pain.
Yeah.
Or the desire to have Tara back or give anything or trade places.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't have any extra energy
Yeah.
at that time.
Yep.
So for me, it was a choice. The little bit of energy that I had in that moment and then woke up with each day after that was going to be spent on how can I still be the best version of myself, which might be 30% today.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very broken. I've lost a piece of me, my partner in life that I took very seriously, that I valued, that I greatly appreciate living this life with my partner, with Tara, is gone. Shattering. However, I don't have the energy or time to sit and ask why. And I honestly, in that moment, didn't care.
Yeah.
because of that prayer.
Mm.
And it was about Tara was an incredible person and had a bright light about her. So authentic. Knew who she was, owned that, and just showed up with all her positives, all her talents, and also all her imperfections.
Mm-hmm.
An amazing ability to not be a poser at all in this world. Just owned who she was, and people saw it. Not everyone liked it,
Mm-hmm.
but I need to pick up on a little bit of that and be that for my kids.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of, if not my most important job in this world is to foster the generation behind me, love them, show them their love, show them their worth, just for who they are, not for the things we do, just for who they are. And a piece of them is taken away, unfair, at a critical time of life. So they're already at a huge disadvantage. And I don't need to be anything more. I can't be Tara for them. But God's saying, show up and just be that best version of yourself on that particular day. It might be 30%, and another day it might be 90%. And let them know their worth and their place in this world. So that is a huge concept, right? And like we could go on for that about that for a while, but that's why I didn't have time for the why, and I didn't want the why.
Yeah,
for her loss.
Yeah, and you've hit on something that I do want to highlight, because it took me 12 years of intense struggle to figure out, but the amount of energy that goes into asking why, and for me, it drove me to my bottom with my battle with alcoholism. It almost took my life. It completely sapped me of energy to focus on the things that mattered, like my wife, like my growing family, my son, and it stripped all of the passions and the authenticity away from me. And it wasn't until I just accepted things as a part of a plan and focused on doing the best that I could as a part of that plan that all of a sudden I recaptured all of this energy.
Yeah. I think there's a key to take that even a little bit further, Kyle, is we get stuck in what happened to us.
Yep.
And again, trying to answer the why behind it. And then we get stuck in that trauma. And I think one of the key separators for me and the work that Eric, you did and introduced me, and then the work I've been doing, is the trauma is not what happened to us. It's not that life-changing moment or that painful event. It's how the body absorbs that. And it's the collection of emotions that the mind and body has produced from that experience. We call it a traumatic experience. It's really not the experience, it's the result inside the body of that experience. And what I have learned to try to do is take that energy of all the questions and the why and shift it to what's the trauma in my body from that experience. That's tough. That's tough. That's getting in. I think especially again for us as guys, I do think innately females do this a bit better. But what are those emotions that have come out of that experience, and where in the body are we holding them?
Yes.
And can we name them?
Yep.
And then can we kind of, so to speak, release them?
Mhm.
We certainly appreciate their value. I don't mean we're denying or just moving on, but I've got to find a way to release the emotions, to release that trauma. Otherwise it'll come out
It's
in negative ways often.
the dam's gonna
Anger,
break eventually.
addiction, or
Yep.
we'll just find ways to numb.
Yes.
Right.
I always tell people in my life and experience, I'm currently dealing with 12 years of emotional backlog and neglect. And it's, the pressure is starting to build down. But early on, when I entered into recovery, there were like big swells where things were just working their way out, and kind of things were depressure or getting depressured. And it's just like, it was the fact of the matter. I ignored it and I suppressed it and I pushed it away for 12 years and I isolated. And I'm really interested, and I'll kind of look to you two for how to do the back and forth between your experiences, but like, given everything you had gone through, like what was the process and the benefit and like some of the outcomes with the specific therapy that you went into? Because I'll kind of lay my own perception and view of things down when I was at the end of my battle with alcoholism. I've been very interested and curious about therapies that involve, plant medicine, whether natural, synthetic. And at the end, my low was so low that I was just like desperately looking for anything that would, like, I felt my options for solving my problem of alcoholism was just slowly dwindling. The thing that pushed me away from doing any sort of like psychedelic therapy was in a large part, like, I didn't want to do the integration work with a therapist. And after now being in recovery and like really learning about the value, it's like, I think there's a really strong coupling between the experience and then the work that happens before, during, and after. I don't know about that though, but not having gone through that process in my journey. So, whatever you're willing to share, like what was that experience like?
And I think it's really important to say that none of us here are doctors or trained in this area. Quick disclaimer, just talking about our experiences, and certainly would encourage anyone out there. It's the professional that you need
Yes.
to seek if you do decide to go down this route. You hear all the stories out there, and a lot of times it's because we're looking to these tools in more of a recreational standpoint, as opposed to in a controlled medical environment with experienced medical professionals. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Eric.
Yes. I mean, you definitely, the coaching is the key. I got turned on to this person through another friend, mutual friend that's going through. And I was really looking at how to reconnect with my feelings again. And that's really what it comes down to, is how to feel anger, sadness, love. And through trauma, through traumatic situations, sometimes you just shut those things off.
Right.
And through law enforcement, the question, why would somebody kill their own son? Why would somebody go through and just do horrible things? I used to ask myself that question all the time. And eventually I would just say, this is how it is. Each person has a moment that they crack or they break, and they don't have the tools to bring themselves back to the emotions, the feelings of how to reconnect. And through this medicine, and the coaching, it was really what I pulled the most off of, was to be able to go back in situations, trauma, and be able to process the trauma without having the feeling overwhelm me. That was the biggest thing for me, to actually see the trauma, go through the trauma again, and almost seeing it as an outer body experience.
Okay.
And it was for me, it was undeniable. I've never felt love like that, and you're safe. You can process things. You don't have this protector overseeing you. You're able to see this and feel these emotions, but not overwhelm you. And you can actually process it through childhood, law enforcement, death, lost. What's the purpose? And I've been on 2 journeys, and both journeys have been completely different. My first one was bouncing from childhood, adolescence, law enforcement, Genevieve, parents, into the future. My last journey was I was stuck in my childhood. The very first abandonment, very first loss, and I just stayed in this childhood process.
Did you, when you're getting ready for a session, are you grounding yourself or kind of like trying to lead into the experience at all?
That's
Or
the key, is you
all right.
don't.
Okay.
Your body has a natural healing process. That's where that Holy Spirit is. That's where that connection is. You're not supposed to let it guide.
Yeah.
And that's where the coaching comes in. You're just supposed to be present and see what comes to you and be open to that presence. And it was the most beautiful experience I've ever experienced, of be able to go back through situations and not and be able to see it as a 50-year-old man.
Yeah.
Through these life experiences, not as a 16-year-old kid or a 10-year-old kid. You can feel that again and say, hey, Eric, you're okay.
Yeah.
You made it through.
Yeah.
Let's process this. Let's able to give some of that negative energy and push it away. It was, and it stirs up all that trauma. Through what I've done as men, we just process it, shove it down, put it in a drawer, and then it's gone.
Yeah.
But to go back and rototill that trauma up, that's really growth right there. I mean, to be able to be acceptant of, man, all your flaws and all those feelings, and say it's okay because I'm still here and I can still help the next person. And that's why I really think this whole journey thing is, I am here to help you. I'm here to share with you. I'm here to share into saying, hey, we can get through this together as long as we share and are open to it.
Yeah.
It's so much better that way. What did you get from your experience, Ben?
So for me, I think the initial thought was, oh, I could, take a pill.
Yep.
Feel
That's the way-
better and process this.
Yeah. Exactly what I was looking at with it.
Right. I'd challenge that mindset, having now experienced it. And fortunately, with a good coach, therapist, it is a tool in a process.
Yep.
Whether, whatever the psychedelic it is, it's a tool and not a magic pill.
Yep.
Not a magic mushroom. I think it's a very good alternative tool to a lot of what we've been prescribed over the years. But I shifted and looked at it as a tool, on my tool belt. It's really key to have that coach who's experienced, who's done it before.
Yep.
and what are those results? So do that research.
Yep.
Who's that coach? Connect with that coach. What is their process? So for me, it was a 3-month process prior to the actual journey and
Wow.
retreat.
Oh.
And then and tools along the way.
Mhm.
For me, somatic experiencing, which is just kind of a meditative process. It's a grounding process. It's breath work.
Mhm.
Prayer for me is a tool. And these are tools that work for me. You got to find your tools. But with like a lot of things in life, it's not one golden goose.
Yep.
It's not one magic pill. So it's the process, it's the planning, it's the experience. And to your point, Kyle, it's the before, during, and after, right?
Mhm.
If we want to look at this just from a psychedelic experience, okay, we can,
Mhm.
but it's not that specific trip or that specific journey that you do go on during that time. It's what led up to it. It's that experience and the after.
Mhm.
And there should be a playbook, and there should be a commitment to the whole. If you're looking for this healing, if you're looking for a good time, well, then that's out there, right?
Mhm.
Like mankind's been doing that with all kinds of drugs for a
Right,
long
yeah.
time. That's not what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I'm talking about this tapping into a deeper level of self, tapping into the trauma and the emotions that make up that trauma, so that I can just tap into a greater version of myself.
Mhm.
Healing, tap into real healing that I can then offer up to my kids, that I can offer to myself,
Right. Yeah.
and then offer to my kids, that I can offer up to God. It that's where my head's at,
Mhm.
and how I've used this experience. And so far it's been really impactful.
What
I mean,
is-
I'd go as far as to say life-changing, a lot of it.
Are you still seeing some things today that are a reflection from that experience?
Absolutely. 3 weeks ago, I lost one of my best college friends.
Mm.
I mean, it's been a year. And again, this is not some badge of honor.
Mhm.
This is just my experience in this season of life.
Right.
I lost one of my best college friends. I was just with him 3 weeks ago. He died in a tragic drowning accident while doing something that he's extremely experienced at. Extremely experienced outdoorsman, angler, for all intents and purposes, little to no risk
Mhm.
at what he was doing, and yet he drowned, and we lost him in a moment. And he's a big influence in my life. These things are gonna happen in my life, and again, I spend less time thinking about the why. I'd be lying if I didn't in
Yeah.
a moment say that, but hey, this is my journey, and it did prepare me unknowingly, Eric.
Right.
It is about the past. It is about the healing, but it's also about the version of myself moving forward. And how can I take these things in life that are often feel unfair and flip it on its head? How can I use this as a positive, as John would want, as many of the people in our lives that might come and go through, or the
Mhm.
pain that's caused? How can we take this pain and create some good out of it?
Mhm.
And these tools have helped me in those moments prevent from a huge setback or prevent from falling back into whatever your vice is, falling back into addiction.
Right.
You know, I know you could speak to that, Kyle. Like
Mm-hmm.
we've got to heal, but we've also got to arm ourselves
Yeah.
and be prepared for the next battle because it's going to come.
Did you, I guess this is a question for both of you, but especially pertaining to that type of experience where you have another sudden loss and again, just the realization that it's like there's no real end to the suffering. But did you notice because of your experience, either in the last months or years, or at other times in your life, has there been a change in like your self-talk or your ability to be forgiving of yourself? And if so, what does that look like, or how is it manifested?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you're just keying in or picking up on that, but absolutely. The positive self-talk. And I'll throw this out to you guys. I imagine I know the answer, but I have a lot of messages that come through my head. I got a lot of negative self-talk that comes through my head. And at times it's driven me to points of depression and a lack of self-worth. And you fucked up on that. You're awful. You didn't do good enough. You didn't go hard enough. You failed. Why'd you do that? Why'd you do it that way? You know, the shame that comes out of giving those messages a value. Right? It's simple. We hear it. We hear it from the gurus out there, but the positive self-talk is another tool that we can arm ourselves with. I'm not saying it's easy. It hasn't been easy for me, but I will say the results of it for me have been powerful. And I start with giving myself some grace. I'm not perfect, but you know what? I am worthy. Just for being a person in this world. Not for anything more. And so are you, Kyle. And so are you, Eric. And so are my kids. And so is everyone else out there. Just for being a person in this world, you are worthy. You have worth. And it's not, we will have actions that are disappointing. We'll make choices that are disappointing. We'll make choices and actions that hurt others. But that does not define our worth. That might be controversial because I'd even take that to death row.
Well, in the world of recovery, there's a saying, just do the next best thing. It's like you can take a misstep, just pause, figure out where you are, realize it, do the next best thing.
And I think in order to do that next best thing, we got to not get stuck in the negativity of the message that we're hearing. So to give so to recognize your worth just because of being a person on this planet. And then give yourself some grace. We're surrounded by perfection, or the ideal of perfection and perceived images that we see. It's a myth.
It is.
It's a myth that a lot of us chase, or we don't even recognize our chasing. Look at social media, right? And it messes with our mind, and it causes power strength to those self-defeating criticism messages that we hear. And so give yourself grace, and then give yourself a positive message. I woke up today. I woke up. I got out of bed today. Maybe you didn't even get out of bed. if you can't find it in that moment, say a prayer to whatever that means to you.
Yeah.
To me, it's to a higher power, Jesus Christ. To you, it might just be a prayer to the universe. I just want you to find that grace in yourself and that positive message that you can give yourself in that moment and then build upon it. The positive messages have been a real life-changing mindset shift for me, Kyle.
Yeah, I would say, Eric, I have a particular question for you on this, but the way I've really altered my self-talk is I find myself asking and speaking to myself in a manner that I would talk to my son, where you have expectations, but there's a lovingness to it. There's a forgiveness to it. And I mean, my self-talk when I was battling alcoholism, it wasn't even just thoughts that ran through my head. I would have days where I woke up in the morning and the first words out of my mouth were, "Fuck you, Kyle." I would scream it out loud because I had slept in, or I had come to and woken up to having drank again the day before when I was resolved not to drink. And I was so angry and hateful at myself that I would actually utter those words out. And that was just the constant thought that was rolling through my mind. And it was years ago that it was shortly after my son was born. My dad and I were out on a hunt together, and I screwed up big time. And I was getting so down on myself. And this was like a dream experience for my dad and I, having grown up hunting together. Here we were in Idaho doing it in the backcountry, and I'm ruining it based on like my just like mental degradation going on during this experience. And my dad just kind of looked at me and he's like, "What would you tell Grant in this situation?" And I kind of use that to like get myself right, but that thought and idea stuck with me. And I find myself much more, I mean, even in our workout this morning, it's like I'm sitting there failing on push-ups, and it's like the self-talk was just so different. And it's just like, you can do this, like get up, and you've got Eric, you've got Ben, like you've got it within you. And Eric, anyway, like given your profession, I've always been curious because your skill as a coach is just incredible. It was such an amazing experience this morning to get to see like a master at their craft at work. And the thing that stood out to me is your ability to discern when to say what. And it's just like there were words that came out of your mouth that were like the exact level of just encouragement that were needed right at the moment, where it was like, you know, as your student, like my mind was starting to break a little bit. So you have like this outward expression, and you've obviously been a coach for decades. You have this outward expression and ability to like speak these positive, encouraging words. Was that always the same internally for you? And if not, like how has your healing journey kind of shifted or changed that?
No, it's definitely have a lot of that negativity, that down talk. But as any soldier, and that's why I used to treat it, I think my training experience sort of really changed as a police officer, teaching the new recruits on life or death training. I mean, that's what I'm trained. My job is to teach these new recruits, these people, of turning the switch and be able to be that positive thinking, and not just one thing. You have to think processing other people watching the situation go down. So you have to be highly skilled, highly trained to protect your life or somebody else's. Superhero stuff.
Oh yeah.
I mean, this is the battleground, and this is where lots of the recruits I used to train were, they've never been in a fist fight. They've never been in an experience of life or death. But if I went to prison and if I asked every prison inmate if they've been in a fist fight, I guarantee you a 99% have been in a fist fight. So
Yep.
you're going to battle with soldiers that just don't have that mindset. And
Right.
my job as a leader is to be able to help you get to that moment, that beast mode moment of being present.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I think with exercise and everything, if you can be not negative talk and if you can be in the moment, and that's where I think my gift is, I know how that feels.
Mm-hmm.
I know how this failure is creeping into and how can we battle it off. And if we do it as a team, as a unit and use some higher power, it's amazing what the body can do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like it's another repetition. It's just something that you really have to focus on horning and be able to fine tune this of how to self-talk yourself to be the best version. And I don't know, it's just one of my gifts. It's sort of a gift of knowing when I could feel your discomfort. I could see it.
Yeah, it's impeccable.
And just those words of encouragement,
Mm-hmm.
you can do anything for 10 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes when you feel like you can only do 3 and that brother's right there with you,
Mhm.
you're willing to go to battle and saying, I got more for you.
Mm-hmm.
But that's life.
I mean, Eric's really good about being present in the moment
Mm-hmm.
too. It's something I'm not great at,
Mm-hmm.
but I see in him and pick up on. He has this ability to really focus on the moment. And I see when he does that, he picks up on things that are needed
Yeah.
to support that moment.
Yeah.
And it's a challenge these days, right? We're getting
Mhm.
bombarded left and right, responsibilities all over the place, messages, a lot of anxiety that comes
Mhm.
from all angles that we get bombarded. But Eric's really good about kind of turning that off, all of that off for the time and focusing on the moment,
Mhm.
that being present.
And I think that's sort of like heaven on earth. I mean, those are sort of moments of when you are truly listening to the birds and seeing and interacting with the person that's in front of you and really being genuine.
Mhm.
Man, that's what I think it's all about.
Yeah.
You know, and that's where being law enforcement, I had to do that every single day because I care about human beings. I
Mhm.
care about the human, but to see them struggling and losing life, death, of those traumatic and trying to help them process through that, that was repetitions.
Mhm.
That was repetitions. And that whole experience when I went through it opened up my heart again. And then Ben lost his wife. And there's a reason why God opened up my heart so I
Yeah.
could relate and dig down deep into my emotions of losing it and share with him again when he really needed me.
Mhm.
And I think that's the hardest thing of accepting us to be vulnerable,
Yeah.
to really cry and really feel someone else's pain and
Mhm.
discomfort and just be there for them present. You don't need to fix it.
Yeah.
You don't need to fix it. You just need to be with them with it,
Yep.
you know? And I think that's the brotherhood that we're really missing out in the world. And we need more brotherhood. We need more connection. It's all
Yeah.
connection.
Yeah. And it's impossible for me not to take that comment to this spot, but it might be a silly transition or even kind of way to wrap this deep, meaningful, and heavy conversation up. But in the aftermath of losing Lucy, we met with one of our care team members, and they said, "Hey, there's a book. It's a child's book, but it's for adults, and it's called The Rabbit Listens." And literally all the premise of that book is like all the emotions come in and tell someone who's going through suffering they should feel a certain way, or they should lash out in a certain manner, or react in a certain way. And at the end, there's this rabbit that comes and just sits, and it just puts itself up, against the one who is suffering, and it just listens. And then that person works through all of those emotions, and the rabbit's there and it listens. And it really is incredible. Like we bought this book and we read it together, and we actually read it out loud with our family. And it was just like the most impactful and emotional experience to do together, because it truly is just like there are points in this grief journey where you just need someone. You need someone to sit there, especially someone who has maybe walked the road like you are about to face and go through beforehand. In recovery, there's nothing more powerful than an alcoholic sitting down with another alcoholic who has found the solution. That's what freed me, was realizing that I wasn't crazy. I wasn't alone like I had perceived. And, you know, Ben, time back to something that you said at the very beginning that I really can't shake. It's like we have lost this capability as a culture, largely, about how to grieve, how to go through moments of suffering. And so, I mean, again, like we kind of talked before starting this podcast, and this journey for me in a large way is just a manner for me to sort out what's been going on in my life, and just ensuring that I can stick in regards to like maintaining my life in the direction that it's going. And I just want to thank you both for sitting down here and taking the time. This has been quite incredible. I mean, Eric, you and I back in June started off a conversation as strangers, left as brothers. And Ben, I feel the exact same way with you. It really is just incredible what these shared experiences can do, and you know how they can bring us together. And now, like sitting around this table, it's like there's more people in each of our lives who can be there for each other. So thank you both very much. This has been humbling. Love you both.
Kyle, thank you. Happy to share experiences anytime and support you on your journey, and hopefully our messages then support someone else on their journey, because we can't do this alone.
Nope.
So find someone, ask someone in your life today. You know, if you're a man, find another man. If you're a woman, find another woman. I think there's a lot of power in that. And I don't mean to get political by no means. I just mean it's who we are, and it's part of our spirit. And, you know, show up for that person in the authentic, broken, imperfect way that you are. Just show up. Just be that rabbit next to them, right? And then, you know, talk about, let's support each other in this life. Like, let's show up authentically. I challenge myself, show up without judgment. Go on a walk. Yeah, this is one of our coach's key things is, and you can practice this on a walk, is go on a walk and observe. The moment a judgment comes into mind, like, oh, I looked at that house, that is an ugly color, right? That's a judgment.
Yep.
It's silly. We all do it.
Yep.
It's part of our psyche. Move on to the next thing. Just try to honor, that tree. Yep, it's green. And it might be a positive judgment. It's beautiful. Move on as soon as it's a judgment. And then try to take that into your everyday life and show up for those that mean the most to you, and try to show up without judgment. And when the judgment comes, just let it flow through. This is something I work on, because a lot of times the judgment then comes out in words to my kids. A lot of times, or to my, you know, late wife in the past. But try to show up authentically and with little to no judgment. I'll leave you with that. But
it's beautiful.
Appreciate this time, Kyle and Eric.
No, I love you guys. Thank you so much. And one more thing maybe to work on is when you first start the day with being present And I have a Jesus calling, sort of a scripture, something I read for the start my intention for the day. But start your day with a positive mindset, gratitude.
Gratitude.
Yes. And if you can do that midday also, those are huge things of giving that traction to start that positivity and just being present. And when you look at somebody, look them into the eyes and really try to just connect and ask them how they are.
Yeah.
A smile goes a long way sometimes in just saying, hey, I love you. And there's nothing wrong with hugs.
No.
God bless. Thank you, everybody.
Love you both. Thank you. If you enjoyed this podcast, share it with others or give us a rating on your channel of choice. My hope is that my story can help others in their struggles with addiction or any other aspects of life that they feel could be bettered. You can follow us on social media at Chapter 3 Stigma on Instagram and YouTube. I cannot solve your problems for you, but I can listen. If you want to reach out with a message through one of those channels, I will respond and let you know that you are not alone. All the best, you are loved, and life is worth every struggle and bit of suffering you have to endure. Until next time, all the best.